So here we are with all of the control splines fit appropriately. And so the next part of the process would be to rig and skin, which we have two buttons here for that. The rigging and skinning process are very, very automated. I'd like to take a step backwards though, and I want to just clarify something again from the last lesson. And if you remember, I closed out of 3ds Max to reload my splines, and the process I took was this. I'm going to review that again. I reset Max, and I closed out of the BonyFace menus, and I loaded in my character prior to the picking process. So this is actually the empty character. Now, the reason I did that is because what I find sometimes is that if I load in the model with everything picked, BonyFace gets a little bit confused. It can be done, but I find that it's a little cleaner to work this way. So I come back to my original file before I even applied BonyFace to it, and as long as all of my geometry is set up correctly, it doesn't really add much more time to the process. I hit the pick head button, select the head, it finds all of the other pieces, I say OK, and I'm off and running. I can generate my splines and then load whatever splines I had customized. So I'll hit the load splines button, and then I'm ready for the rigging process. Now again, what I'm going to do is I'll load a head in that already has the picking process applied to it. So I'll reset one more time, close out of the BonyFace menus. I always do that just to make sure they clear themselves completely. And I'll open a file I have here called picked, and you can see this one does have the picking process in place. I can open up the BonyFace menu, and essentially it'll work the same, but sometimes a few of these buttons might get a little confused if I load from this point. So that's why I like to go from the clean model and start the process again if I'm continuing on a day later or something like that. But I should have no problem generating splines. You can see they're generated just fine. And then I will load all of the custom splines I had already created, and that works fine too. So I'll take it from here, and the next part of the process is to rig and skin. So we have a rig it button and a skin it button. So with rigging, there's an option here called smooth, and if you have a fairly low resolution model, which we do here, we can activate smooth, which will just apply a smoothing to it. If you have a very high resolution model, you may want to skip adding smooth to it. Or you could not smooth a low resolution model either, and then just apply a turbo smooth or a mesh smooth over here from the modifier list after the rigging process or the skinning process. I'll turn smooth on. Now, if I already have the model rigged and skinned to maybe a cat or biped or a custom bone system in Max, I would want to pick the head bone so it knows what to attach this entire system to. I don't have that in this case, so I won't pick a head bone, and I'll hit the rig it button. So this process will take a little bit of time. You'll see that it's setting up all of the control objects for the rig. And then when it's done, typically what we have to do is then just hit the skin it button. But I do want to point out a few options we have here. So we have the ability to hide, show, and also change the size of some of our rig controls if you want to do that. And that would really just depend on your model. So all of these different control objects we have here, we have spinners for them to change their size. Another important feature is the ability to reorient some of these primary control objects, the ones in yellow. In particular, are primary control objects. So if I select an object, I can adjust its rotation here, or even its position. And with this model, I don't really need to do that. Ultimately, or ideally, I should say, what we're trying to do is make sure our control objects are facing off the object in the normal direction, perpendicular to the surface. And this one actually looks like it might be off a little bit. So what I can do is go to Adjust Controls and do a rotation adjustment and maybe just move those out a little bit. That'll give me a little bit better control in the animation process. So those are some things you might want to check after you hit the Rig It button before you hit the Skin It button. But what I find that for the most part is that we don't need to really change much here. Once we rig it, we just go directly to doing Skin It. Now there's one option under Skin It that we want to be aware of, and that's Reuse Skin. It says off is faster. Well, the only time we want to reuse the skin is if we already have a skin modifier applied to our object in the situation where we have, we had maybe the head already skinned to a cat or biped system, and we want to make sure that it picks up that skinning, especially around the neck area, so that we don't get any ripping or tearing when maybe we move the neck, and we want it to stay connected to the body. Now I don't have that in this case, so I'll turn it off, and then I'll hit the Skin It button. It'll go through the skinning process. You can see the BF skin added here to my object, and it's adding all of the bones. And this is probably the most time-consuming procedural piece in the entire system. That takes the longest. And when we're done, assuming that we created our splines, our control splines appropriately, we should have a character that is ready to be animated and work fairly well. And it looks like we do. Now I could I could pose my character a little bit here and hide all my objects so I can see, how, in particular what I'm looking at here are the eyelids. Remember we talked one lesson ago about the Move Eyelid Center button and what that does. So here's where I want to test that, and if I don't get a very good, oops, I hid the wrong object there. If I don't get a very good eyelid deformation, I might need to go back and adjust that location. And we also have the ability to adjust the skin weights here, just like we would a regular skinned object in Max. So if I select the geometry itself, I can select BF Skin, hit Edit Envelopes, and I can come in here and select my envelopes just like I would with any other object in Max and edit it accordingly. Either doing vertex editing, I can paint the skin weights, I can use the weight table or the weight tool. All those tools are available to us. So that's the very basic process of rigging and skinning in BonyFace. So I hope it helps you out to some degree. It gets you up and running and started, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to design some other videos that cover more features and dive into some of these tools in more specifics.